You might think you need to master tons of skills to get good at slide, and I certainly thought that when I started, and so I jumped in and just began learning everything that I could, but it took me forever because I wasn't focused. I tried learning everything all at once. But over the years, I've learned that you can build real slide skills while making music with just a few techniques in hand. The key is to choose the right riffs and tunes to work on. So in this lesson, I'll show you how to build a stripped down Death Letter Blues style riff that's fun to play and builds foundational slide skills. Let's start with one of the core slide movements that you're going to use often, not just in Death Letter, but in other blues tunes as well. It's a building block type movement, and it's centered around the 3rd fret, and it guarantees a bluesy sound. Let's take a look. When you look at that riff, it seems like there's a lot going on, and there is, but when we break it down into its core elements, it starts to seem more doable, and you're going to build some skills that will help you in other tunes as well. So let's start breaking it down with the picking. Let's just look at what I'm doing. For the most part, it's thumb playing the 5th string, and then index finger brushing up on the offbeat. So when the thumb is not playing, through strings 2, 3, and 4, just kind of like this. That's the main motion, right? And that actually is the movement that starts us off. On that brush up, that's where we get the slide involved for the first time. We're going to slide from the 2nd fret up to the 3rd. Keep in mind that we slide on the strings, not on the frets. We just start out over the 2nd fret and then move up to the 3rd. But there's something really subtle that I like to do here as we get to the 3rd fret. Call it the brick wall slide, and we can stop this slide very abruptly just by picking up the slide. But there's one other thing you got to do, because if you just pick up the slide, you get that string noise, which can sound cool at times, and maybe sometimes you want it, but we want to be able to control when we want that noise. So what we need to do is use a finger that's behind the slide. When we pick up the slide, we want to make sure that that finger is down and dampening the strings so that they don't make a sound. Check this out. Nothing happening with the picking hand here, but you get that brick wall effect, right? Pick up the slide quickly and make sure that finger is laying on the strings. It is not fretting, right? And it could be any finger, depending on which finger you use for your slide. It might be a different finger. But that's a really cool moment to stop and do that brick wall and then go back to the bass beat with the thumb. Remember, we're kind of doing this back and forth thing here. But on that next upstroke, what would be a brush up, if we were really sticking to a pattern here, we're going to do something else that is a very trainable skill. It's one that you really should work on, and it's the ability to target a single note with the slide. And notice that I did a couple things. First, I hit that note solid, right? We're not sliding into it, right? I'm making sure to have good intonation the second that I hit that note, that I pluck the string, right? Good intonation means that I'm directly above the 5th fret. On this case, on the 1st string. So we've got to have some accuracy in our jump, in our movement from the 3rd fret up here to that 5th fret. And there's another thing that I'm doing here. I'm kind of moving diagonally. If you notice, the slide kind of drops across the strings. I want to target this single note with the leading edge of my slide. Now I've got a ball end here, but I'm really not using it. It's just the edge before it starts to round over. So if you're playing a different slide, it won't matter. You just need to play the edge of the slide and target that one string. That's going to come in handy when you're starting to progress as a slide player and target single notes at a time. It's a really cool skill, and I think it works out really well in this riff, because it just pokes right out of the middle of this. We're doing a lot of lower string work, and then there's this syncopated, and of 2 stab on the G on the 1st string, 5th fret. Then we can continue with the bass, but we also have this kind of tag ending. It looks a lot like what we've already done with the slide. So this is another one of those core elements. right? We've done that. Brush up and then down. Now here, I'm kind of pushing through a little bit more with the thumb so that I can catch more strings on my slide from 2 to 3 and then up. Right? Let's slow that down and you can see these elements come together in this really cool riff. There it is with the brick wall. And if we speed up, see how when you put these movements together, they really build something that is bigger than the sum of the parts? And yeah, it takes focus to master even these simple little moves, but deconstructing them like we just did and then building it back slowly and deliberately will help you master these little movements individually. And then you're going to have them ready to tackle other tunes. And while this riff is definitely cool and a huge feature of the blues progression, it's not the whole song. We need to take it somewhere. We need to change the chords. The main riff is centered around a G chord. There's a lot of open strings. We're tuned to open G, so it makes sense. And we'll call that the 1 chord. And when it's time to change chords, we really need 3 things. We need to know where to go, we need to know what to do when we get there, and we need to know how to connect to the next change. So here's some ideas to get you started. The first chord change that we're going to come to is at the 5th fret. That's a C chord in the key of G, and we can do it by barring across all 6 strings or playing any note at the 5th fret with our slide. That works for our 4 chord. If we were taking Son House's lead here, we might actually bar with our index finger at that fret and play a little lick, a little movement along the 1st string, the 7th fret and even the 8th fret there. And as cool and bluesy as that sounds, especially at that 8th fret when we get that dominant 7th sound happening, it's also very difficult to play. So while we work up to playing something like that, we can do something a little bit simpler, but still signifies the chord change. We can use the slide to slide into our chord, do one of those upstrokes, and then have a little fun with some vibrato. Just thumping that bass and adding that vibrato with those chord tones ringing gives a nice stripped down, simple sound, and it works really well here. But one thing that we can do at the end of the first measure, we've got 2 measures here over C. So we're going to start one and come back. Well, in between the 2 measures, I like to take what's called, or what I call, a breath stroke. It was right there, kind of quick, but on the end of 4, it's an upstroke through the open strings. It just feels like we're opening up, taking a breath, and then coming back to our 4 chord C at the 5th fret. Now we want to do something at the end of this next measure too. We could do another breath stroke, but we're kind of going to the open strings with our G chord. That's where the progression, which we'll get to next, where that is taking us. But what we can do here instead is just add a simple little single note lick that kind of connects from one chord to the next. And what I chose to do here, just 2 notes, really 1 note different, because this technically was part of the bass. 3, beat 3, beat 4, just drop down to the 3rd fret of the 5th string, and then open, right? And that open string, that's where we're going to start our main riff again. Remember, you can build up to full Son House later by fretting and stretching up the fretboard, but to start, focus on hitting those chords and keeping the music going, and then apply that vibrato to make those chords kind of come to life, and add simple little, even one-note connectors that move the tune along. But now that we know what to do, and we've got a good slide sound going, and we know where to play it, we need to know when to do it. The 12-bar blues progression gives us a roadmap that works for countless songs, and we're going to plug what we just learned into a map that builds the backbone of an entire blues jam. The first 4 measures of a 12-bar blues in the key of G will be over the G chord. And even though we're not playing a G chord, we're playing a riff that is centered around G. So we're going to play that riff for the first 4 measures. One riff equals a measure, so 4 times. There's bar 1, bar 2, bar 3, and 4. Now we're changing chords, and you might already know where we're going. We talked about it in the last section. We're going to the 5th fret because that's our 4 chord, and we're going to be here for 2 measures. But we've got our little tricks that we could bring along. 2, 3, 4 with the breath, connect. And then that connector moves us right back into the riff. So those were bars 5 and 6. So now bars 7 and 8, 2 of the riffs. So bar 9, we're going somewhere we haven't been yet. We're going up to the 7th fret. That's the 5 chord. In this key, that's a D. And again, if we were doing the Son House thing, we might bar at that fret and play that little line, or line like it, along the first string. And it might even be a little bit easier here because we're up further on the fretboard, the frets are closer together. But if you're still working for it, what we can do is slide into that 7th fret and do the same thing that we talked about for our 4 chord. 2, 3, 4. Even with that vibrato and the breath stroke there, because we're changing. This feels like a good moment to take a breath, head back to the 4 chord, connector lick, and we're at the final 2 bars. And we're going to play our riff here. As our complete 12-bar form, and by mastering this structure, you're going to have the foundation for so many blues songs and even some improvisation down the road. But here's the cool part. While the progression is a familiar map, we can put the elements together in a variety of different ways, and that gives plenty of room for you to jam on something that sounds like you. Here's an example of how you can put these basic elements together to create a 12-bar jam. My BGI members, you're going to have access to the tab files and the interactive tab player to help you learn this at your own pace. Look for Tuesday Blues 478 in the lesson library. We talked about how using simple connector licks can help you move between chord positions, and these connectors are really where your slide playing can come alive with some personality and some expression. So watch Tuesday Blues number 431 next, where I'll show you how to generate an endless supply of bluesy connector licks. I'll see you there. Until then, practice smart and play on.